This webinar is going to describe what we call the writing rules, the guidelines for writing effective comments in the feedback reports that you will develop for quality award applicants. Our learning objectives for this webinar are: 1. Discuss the purpose of strength and opportunity for improvement comments. 2. Recognize writing rules conventions. And 3. Clarify well-written versus poorly written comments. Let's talk about the purpose of strength and OFI comments. Strengths are developed to help the applicant recognize the effective practices they have in place. As examiners, we identify those through the lens of ADLI, approach, deployment, learning, and integration. This is a valuable part of the RMPEx assessment and award process that is based on the Baldrige evaluation method. We don't just look for things the organization is doing wrong, like many compliance audits do, but we look for things to acknowledge the good work the applicant has already done. Opportunities for improvement, or OFIs as we call them, identify key areas that the examiners have determined that, if implemented, would move the applicant to the next scoring range. So that's the purpose of using the Baldrige criteria to develop the feedback report. But overall, what we're trying to do is to help the applicant identify what they should keep doing, their strengths, and start doing, their OFIs, to become a higher performing organization with improving results. A few things to consider as you go through the webinar. First, the writing rules are provided to you in the quick reference guide. You should keep this quick reference guide next to you as you develop your comments to be sure you're following all the writing rules. The writing rules are not optional. If you follow the writing rules as you develop your feedback-ready comments and check them before submitting your feedback report, you'll minimize rework later. Here is our promise to you. If you learn to use the writing rules, it will make you a better business writer. Your emails and texts will be more concise, and your writing will be more concise and have greater clarity. We'll start by reviewing writing rules for strengths. Strengths should reflect all processes that meet criteria and scoring calibration guideline requirements. Your strengths should support the score you have assigned. We'll discuss later that OFIs should support why the score isn't higher. Also, you shouldn't have more than one strength comment per area to address. For peak applications, areas to address are 4.2A1, 2.2A2, for example. Strengths should provide enough detail so the applicant understands why you identified it as a strength. A good strength comment has a clear opening statement, then provides evidence to support that statement. The opening statement should be very precise in identifying the strength. Now we're going to address specific OFI comment writing rules. OFIs should reflect criteria requirements, including scoring guidelines, that the applicant does not meet. OFIs should identify the vital few opportunities that keep the applicant from being at the top of a scoring range or in the next scoring range. The use of the scoring calibration guidelines, in concert with the criteria, help in identifying the appropriate OFIs for the applicant. OFIs should be relevant and actionable. OFIs should include a clear opening statement, then evidence of what is missing, and a clear "so what" that describes the potential adverse consequences of not doing what the criteria require. The use of the key factors that you or your team has identified for the applicant will help you develop relevant and actionable OFIs. Key blocker OFIs are identified with an asterisk. This is done to help the applicant organization prioritize what they work on. This should be an OFI identified as the primary one, keeping the applicant from scoring in the higher levels of a scoring range or blocking them from scoring in the next scoring range. OFIs are not prescriptive and are based on criteria requirements. If you find yourself using the words should or could, your comments are probably prescriptive, telling the organization what they should do. Your role as an examiner is not to be confused with being a consultant. OFI comments are based on process or system deficiencies, not on poor writing. We don't critique the writing of the application, no matter how frustrating it may be to read a poorly written application. It's a requirement that the application be written by the applicant organization, not a consultant or other expert. So writing may not be a skill of the people writing the application, and they are probably not as familiar with the criteria as you may be. In addition, we don't use the word how in comments. For instance, we see a lot of comments that say, it is unclear how the organization ... We prefer to have you write, it is not clear that the organization has a process to ... This focuses the comment on the process, not that the applicant didn't provide a process description. Now let's look at some writing rules for all comments, strengths and OFIs. Comments should not contradict other comments in the same or other items. Be sure to review your entire feedback report to be sure that a strength in one item doesn't contradict an OFI in the same or another item. This usually happens during the consensus process when one examiner sees a strength and another sees an OFI for the same area, and both comments end up in the final feedback report. Comments don't have more than one strength or OFI per area to address. If you have more than one comment for an area to address, strength or OFI, please combine them into one strength or OFI. You may have a strength and an OFI for one area to address, but you should not have more than one strength or more than one OFI per area to address. Comments must accurately reflect information from the applicant. As you finalize your comments, do a fact check with the application to be sure that you are accurate in what you are writing, including verifying results data and figure references. Comments use the applicant's terminology and avoid the use of acronyms. Try to avoid using Baldrige language that the applicant may not understand. Put yourself in the chair of the applicant and consider, would I understand what this comment is saying? Also avoid the use of acronyms, especially if they aren't acronyms used by the applicant. Comments stand alone with no vague modifiers. The applicant should be able to read the feedback report and not have to go back to the application to understand a comment. For instance, if the comment says, Figure 1.1 through 3 does not fully describe how senior leaders address key customers, the applicant would need to go back to the application to understand this comment. It's better to say, the application's communication processes, Figure 1.1 through 3, do not describe how senior leaders communicate with key customers. Also, we do not use modifiers like excellent, good, or inadequate to describe applicant processes. These are not quantifiable and are relying on your judgment about what that description means. Comments are grammatically correct. Always have the person on your team who may self-identify as the grammar advocate to check the grammar in the feedback report. Comments are consistent with SCORE and scoring guidelines. Several of the RMPEx assessment practices help ensure comment-score alignment. For instance, every process item scoring 30% or higher must have a comment that addresses learning as a strength or an OFI. Also, put an ADLI references in the body of your comments. Every process item scoring 50% or higher must have a comment that addresses a learning strength. This helps with scoring, and it also helps the judges understand your team's thinking in the scoring process. Don't bury a strength in an OFI. By this, we mean don't start an OFI with a phrase like, although the applicant has the beginning of a strategic planning process, without having a strength or the beginning of a strategic planning process in the strengths. Think of it this way. Make sure that the first time an applicant hears about something they are doing well is not in an OFI comment. So if you find you have some although sentences in OFIs, be sure there is a parallel strength in the strengths section. Comments are concise, but not cryptic. Comments are typically 2 to 4 sentences in length. Be sure you have the clear opening statement and supporting evidence for every comment, as well as a so what relevance statement for each OFI. And be sure to consider each comment from the perspective of the applicant. Will they understand what you're trying to say? The feedback report includes a notation of the area to address, such as 1.2b, next to each strength and OFI comment. This helps the applicant fully understand the comment by being able to match up the comment to the criteria questions. Remember, the applicant is probably not as familiar with the criteria as you are. A good practice as you finish the feedback report is to set it aside for a day, then review it as if you were the applicant and consider, if I were the applicant, would I understand this comment? Is there comment score alignment? In other words, do the comments support the scores that are assigned? Do the comments provide insights to help the applicant take the next developmental steps to performance excellence? In other words, is the feedback report actionable? Let's look at some poorly written comments, then at some good comments. The applicant should consider using lean methodologies as part of their performance improvement system. The use of lean methodologies would help the entire workforce become engaged in performance improvement. Two key things are wrong with this comment. First, it's a prescriptive comment. The use of the word should is a good indicator of a prescriptive comment, telling them what they should do. Our job is to identify the system or process deficiency. It's up to the applicant to determine how to resolve it based on their unique characteristics. Second, the so what statement addresses a positive consequence. Our rule is to address the potential negative consequences if the applicant doesn't address the OFI. Although senior leaders may have excellent communication methods with their workforce, it is unclear what communication methods are used with key customers. Without effective communication process in place with key customers, the applicant may not be aware of changing requirements from the different customer segments. A vague modifier is used in the first sentence, many excellent communication methods. We are not to be judgmental in our comments. This comment has a strength buried in an OFI. Although the applicant has many excellent communication methods with their workforce, we don't know what the strengths are. This would be okay if there was a parallel strength addressing communication methods with the workforce. The applicant has a strategic planning process. In this comment, no evidence of strength is provided, such as a brief description of the strategic planning process. The applicant does not have a method to assess their workforce capability and capacity. Their workforce turnover is 36%. First, the comment does not have a so what statement to tell the applicant why this is so important to them. There is also a grammar problem. An applicant should be referred to as it's, not they. Results should be referenced in Category 7. Referencing the workforce turnover here has no relation to the process of assessing capability and capacity. Here's an example of a comment with the strength buried in an OFI. The applicant promotes and ensures ethical behavior by monitoring email, computer use, social media, observations, and ethical behavior, reviewed through a code of conduct provided at hire and annual training for compliance. An approach to unethical behavior includes legal department review after investigation by the applicant's compliance officer, and a quality improvement hotline and email is posted for reporting. Sounds like a strength, doesn't it? But the comment ends as follows. But it is not evident that the applicant systemically evaluates its ethical behavior, such as compliance breaches or survey results. This is a real OFI, but it had no corresponding strength. You can see that the first 2/3 of the comment is what the applicant does well, and the short OFI at the end is confusing. Is it an approach or is it a learning OFI? Okay, so enough of looking at poorly written comments. Let's look at some good comments. Here's an example of a good strength comment. The applicant uses multiple methods to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of its workforce engagement processes. The employee engagement survey questions are reviewed each year to ensure that they address the key drivers of workforce engagement. Key drivers are assessed for changes each year through focus groups with each workforce group. We have a clear opening statement. We have evidence in the second and third sentences. Finally, we have some additional information identifying the learning, or evaluation and improvement, component in the second and third sentences. Now, let's look at a good OFI comment. It is not evident that the applicant has a process by which it incorporates innovation into their strategic planning process, although innovation is described as one of the applicant's values. As a result, the applicant may not address innovation from a strategic level, which is important in addressing the strategic challenge of changing healthcare environment. Just like with the strength comment, there's a clear opening statement. Remember that for OFIs, we want a good statement of relevance, a so what connection. This statement refers them to the applicant values and a strategic challenge, all things that you would have in your key factors. So, let's summarize this webinar on writing rules for your feedback report comments. Strength comments identify practices that the applicant is implementing based on what the criteria require. OFIs identify what the applicant is not doing that the criteria require. Feedback comments should identify what the applicant should keep doing, strengths, and start doing, their OFIs. A set of writing rules helps to ensure consistent feedback quality. These writing rules are provided in the quick reference guide you'll get at training, and following them is mandatory. Thanks for your commitment to performance excellence. See you at virtual training.